We are not what we know, but what we are willing to learn. Mary Catherine Bateson. Welcome to It's Time for Science. Today, Nicole Krefting, the Elementary Curriculum Coordinator for the Grand Forks School District in North Dakota, joins us to talk about integration strategies. Nicole discusses the intense process they went through when they were choosing a district-wide science curriculum, the challenges faced, and how important teacher training and support is. In the interest of full transparency, this podcast is produced and supported by School Specialty and FOSS Science. And while we are extremely proud of and highly recommend our most excellent curriculum, our intent here is to talk about the challenges and advantages of district-wide science curriculum implementation in general. So we will be talking about FOSS a lot, but hopefully we can cover the topic of integration overall. It's time for science, and it's time to talk about integration strategies. Joining us is Nicole Krefting, the Elementary Curriculum Coordinator for the Grand Forks School District in North Dakota. The Grand Forks School District has adopted the FOSS science curriculum across their entire district of K-6 schools, 14 in fact, and I'm going to talk with Nicole about that whole process. So Nicole, welcome, and thank you for being here.
Thank you for having me. It's a pleasure.
Let's talk a little bit about your background. I know you've been teaching for, you have a couple of years, like 30 of them. Can you tell me a little bit about your background?
Yes, you're right. I started teaching in 1989, so I guess that dates me a little bit, but I'm proud of those education years. I have taught in Grand Forks Public Schools for 33 years with that classroom experience in kindergarten, first, second, third, and fourth grade. And then moved on to the instructional coach position where I got to work with all grade levels. And now currently I'm in the curriculum department and love it because now I work with our whole K through 12 program, but really centered in that elementary K through 6 area.
I love that kind of career arc. That's fantastic. Yeah. I want to start with the big general question that we always ask here on It's Time for Science, which is, why is science education important for kids, especially at the elementary level? Let's start there. Why do you think science is important to be teaching our elementary kids?
Oh, I can give you a bunch of reasons. Science is one of my passions as a teacher and educator, but I think science really, it supports all that background knowledge that students need just to have that knowledge of the world. But it does it in such an exciting way, hands-on, high interest. They discover the world and the phenomena around them, and then have the ability to carry all those skills that they have into other curricular areas as well. We really believe that knowledge in the science areas is crucial for total literacy success. And so that's been our biggest thing at Grand Forks Public Schools, is that science education instruction is very highly supported. And our teachers really know that we believe that science needs to be hands-on, taught every day in the classroom to support everything that they're doing with their students.
I think it's great because we often emphasize here how science bridges pretty much all other subjects, math, reading, literacy, social studies. And so that's why, we evangelize that all the time about how important science itself is for all of the subjects.
Exactly. And when you hit math, you're spot on. When I'm watching my students in classrooms that I visit throughout the district, you see all of those happening during that science time with the calculations and the spatial drawings they're doing and the literacy talk. It's amazing. It's a support. It's a bridge.
Now, we talk about hands-on science, and you guys have you've been using FOSS actually for a number of years in your district. Is that right?
That's correct. We have been using FOSS since 2010 was our initial adoption, but most recently have upgraded to the next generation FOSS science materials. And so that did some switching for our teachers in some of the new things that have been added to really match those standards, but also we have the support of having modules or pieces for every area of science, the earth science, physical science, our life science. And so we feel like now we have the real complete package, resource, and materials to really make our science instruction come alive.
We talk often because a lot of this podcast is aimed at elementary school teachers, and as obviously preaching to the choir here, but not all elementary school teachers are necessarily comfortable with science. They may feel intimidated by it. So we normally don't talk about FOSS in sort of a commercial way, but this is what the whole integration thing is about for this episode. So what is the advantage of just starting with that, having the kits and the things? How can that help an elementary school teacher who might just feel a little bit uncomfortable with science?
Well, you said one of the words, having the kit. I think a lot of pieces that might be nerve-wracking or scary for teachers is not having the materials that you need to actually carry out the investigations you want to do. With our resource, that's provided with it, but also just step-by-step support for our classroom teachers. It builds background knowledge for them first, and they have all kinds of places within that resource, both print and digital, that they can get their true understanding to learn alongside our students. That's another big thing that we encourage is you don't have to be the expert, but you have to be the expert of having that mind to bring the excitement and the learning right there with your students, and to be willing to take the risks that it takes to really truly be a scientist. And that's what we expect out of our students. And so we also really work with our teachers to have that same mindset. That part of science is having to do some trials, sometimes not always getting it right away, but that you have the tools, the materials, the supports to have that total investigation and inquiry approach.
I think it's whenever we talk about this, it always feels very freeing to me, because I think that, especially for the kids, it's like you go in there, you're assuming your teacher knows everything about everything. And yet science is all about, no, we don't. And we're having to figure this out together. And I think that that's always a wonderful thing to see the kids have to deal with that. Like, oh, I get to ask the questions. I think that's amazing.
Oh, I agree with you. And part of the most exciting thing as the teacher and walking into those classrooms is when you see the looks on the kids' faces, but at the same time, you're seeing it on the teachers' faces. So when you say doing it together, I have really enjoyed watching that connection between teacher, student, when they see this whole process, and they just are so engaged and excited as a whole unit working together through it.
That's got to be exciting for the teachers. They get to like work with the kids in more of a way than just, I'm just telling you the facts. I think that's awesome.
Exactly.
So let's talk about integration and implementation in general, sort of like, now this is district wide, going to go over many, many schools. Now, how did that come about? Like when you do that, who do you approach first? Why is having it district wide important in general?
Right. Well, it's a pretty long journey, to be honest with you, and we did some intense work to really make this happen. We have always tried to keep our K-5 in the same resource, just to really help provide a clear pathway for our students through that elementary educational year, that they not only learn the content, but really kind of some of the procedures and how the program worked. But then in our last adoption, we brought that grade 6 along, which is the first year of our middle school. Exciting for us because it's the bridge for our students. Moving into middle school, they have something that's familiar to them and something that they understand. When they move into a whole different school, a whole different group of people, different type of class. So that was one of our looks when we did this. But we do a pretty intensive study of different resources before we even decide what resources to look closer at. And so our district curriculum team pulled teachers, administrators, and science, department leads together and reviewed resources. And then we actually did pilot 3 resources for an entire year before we made that commitment to have an adoption. So it was a 2-year process to get us to the formal adoption stage in the 3rd year of the work. And then we really brought some teachers who had that passion for science, but with a lot of different years of experience, some very veteran teachers, also some quite newbies that brought a new perspective into the game. And then we worked with our FOSS resources for a half a year before we brought everybody else on board. So it was about a 3-year process until we got to the point where we had a full implementation adoption going on.
Wow, that's amazing. I
Yeah.
love that though. So you got to do your research. That's awesome. I was thinking also if where would someone start with this process if a teacher said, wow, this, we really need a district wide type of thing. You're talking about all these different teams involved. So how does that work up the ladder? I mean, how does the hierarchy work? How did this really get started, and then what kind of teams had to be made?
Right. So we have kind of a curricular resource rotation in our district. We set out 7-year plans where each 7 years we look at a content area that we feel needs to either be upgraded, looked at, or because of standard changes, maybe some of the things aren't quite matching how they used to. So the first step is that cycle. And that's where my department, the Curriculum Instruction Technology Department, we have 2 supervisors. We develop the process of the research and we form a steering committee. When that happens, we look for teachers who are interested. So we do a reach out, and it's not a huge committee to start with, so we don't have too many people trying to figure out where to begin. But usually that team is roughly between 20 and 25 people. And then from that team, that's where we review resources. And after that review, do recommendations for a pilot, which then we bring more teachers on board. So once we have a pilot, we make it notice to people that, would you like to be part of this committee? You obviously have certain people that have really high interest in certain curricular areas that you might reach out to first, but we work with our instructional coaches, our administrators, and find people who feel like it's the right time for them to dig into a new resource. And then our team is formed that does that first process. So it could be you are recommended to be part of it, or your instructional coach or your admin thought that you would be a really big benefit to looking at these materials closely. And so then that's how we form that team. And they are the ones from that teacher standpoint, along with our curriculum department, that make the final recommendation to our school board.
So in the long run, we are again sponsored by FOSS, but let's talk a little bit about why you chose FOSS. What led you to choose FOSS for your district and the whole implementation process?
So this is really interesting. When we first started reviewing materials, we had FOSS for quite a while, almost 10 years. And so people were really interested in looking at what else was out there. So we pulled from many different areas. When we did our first look, we had over 8 different resources that we were considering, and then narrowed it down to 3. When we narrowed it down to those 3, we did look for very specific things. We really wanted to know that they would support our standards. North Dakota state science standards are written closely to next generation science standards, but also have a few little twerks that are unique to our state with them. So we always look for that standard alignment to begin and make sure that it's taking us down the right path. And then we look for teacher and student engagement. We look for hands-on investigation and support. Does it support all of those things? We also really look for the writing piece in it, and FOSS just really met all of those things. For us, they were the clear choice. We had positive things about the other 3 resources we looked at, but it was this one that checked all the boxes for us with just all the parts it had available, and truly the inquiry piece of it was important to us. The notebooking piece of it was really important to us. And having all those materials that were there so that teachers felt like they could really do true investigations, not just kind of pulling hodgepodge materials that were a makeshift investigation, if you call. And so it had the selling points that brought us back, even though we thought at the beginning maybe it was time to just see something new. We ended up making a full circle and just updating to their next version.
Well, that's great. I mean, obviously, we're very proud of it, so I
Right.
fully believe in it from here. But I also
Right.
like that you guys took the time to think about a change. I mean, because that's what's important is to figure out what's best for your students,
Right.
and get it implemented over a period of 3 years. That's awesome. I think
Right.
that takes a lot of time and thought.
Yeah.
How do you support your teachers in general in implementing once it's decided? What kind of things do you guys do? What kind of things does FOSS do to do training, things like that? How did that work?
Right. Well, I'm going to say this is probably the part that to me is the most exciting. We really looked at a type of professional development and support that would be sustainable and not be a quick, we're here to show you and now you're on your own. We
Mm.
wanted something that was multi-year, that would really give our teachers, both new teachers coming on board and veteran teachers, the feeling like FOSS was a resource that they really felt they had knowledge in and could really bring all the good pieces of it out with their students. And so we had several layers of implementation. We worked directly with our trainer, who really to this day still is a strong connection to Grand Forks Public Schools because she spent so much time with us.
Mm.
And we wrote a plan for 2 years. We started year one with whole grade level teams having 3 different meeting days that year where we could support them in starting each of their new modules. They're about a trimester long, and got to work with all the teachers in a capacity where they had 2 to 3 hours with our trainer and ourselves, our team, our coaches, to just dig in deeper and deeper. We also had, besides those 3 in-person meetings, we had virtual meetings that were kind of in between time where we had an hour with them just to ask questions, to give them quick tips or little things that might be something they weren't ready for at the start, but could now have the capacity with their growth to find something new that might be in FOSS. And then year 2, we took that even a step further and we developed focus leaders for each school. And so we had a teacher at each of the grade levels who got intense training so that they then could go back and support their colleagues. They kind of became our FOSS expert teachers along with our instructional coaches, and had 3 live full day sessions where that smaller team got to dig even deeper and be a level of support for their teachers. So I feel like once again, we took a longer approach, but I feel like it's really paid off for us. We have teachers that feel very comfortable with the materials, who see the importance of it, and who really are seeing how it does integrate all those curricular areas and really support what we're just doing for the well-rounded learning of all of our students.
That's great. As we mentioned earlier, I think there are teachers who may not be comfortable with that. So that's fantastic that they feel that way.
Yeah.
I was going to ask, I mean, my next question is how do teachers in general feel about district-wide curriculum in general, and have they really embraced this?
They have embraced it. And, I think one of the things that we have noticed in FOSS has been the perfect example is what happens for our students when the same thing is going on throughout the different buildings and the experiences they have, but also from grade level to grade level. Like I said, when we moved it into 6th grade, our kids were so excited leaving elementary when they got there and saw that they still had, this piece of their day when they got to 6th grade, because that just happened, 2 years ago when we did the formal adoption. This is year 3, that it made that bridge for them. But I think our teachers really see the value in us working together as well as educators, having the support of each other district-wide. You're not in a silo. You're all a team with it. And then our expectations for our students and what we think we can bring them to is consistent because we're all having the same resource that we can use and the same training to really build that as Grand Forks Public Schools together.
That's awesome. It kind of leads right into my next question: was any noticing improvements in student performance, and how does a standard curriculum benefit students? But have you noticed these kind of things and the level of excitement in the kids? How does that pan out?
Oh, it really has been. I had a principal who told me he was in the lunchroom and, just talking about regular lunch and the vocabulary that the students were using. He's like, this is all the way back to science. The way that they were looking at the food they were eating, and talking about translucent and transparent and all the different scientific terms they were using. He's like, it's carrying through into their other content areas.
Wow.
But also, I'm going to say, besides just the science content itself, we are noticing it in how our students can attain information and the background that it brings into other areas that they're studying is fantastic. Some of our core ELA things revolve, I'm going to use third grade for an example, around the sea and water. And their very first module they do in science is called Water and Climate. So you can just see how that would be the perfect integration to support their ELA work as well. The other thing that we've noticed is that our state assessments are very much performance-based, where you have to do a lot of digging and come up with your answers and your pieces from the work that you do. And science, our FOSS science does that daily. It's building upon what you learn and trying something else new, and then being able to speak and write about it. And so it's supporting what our students are being asked to do to meet those North Dakota state standards in a more formal way in the summative testing that they're taking as well.
That's great. I love hearing those stories because it's always just reaffirming that I think kids, when they have to work together in science, they have to discover together, as opposed to working on a project in something else. Somebody might have a strong suit in one thing, another thing, but these are like teams. You're actually forming teams and learning how to communicate and write and all that kind of stuff. It's wonderful.
And I think it really opens up the possibilities for all types of students, where you see that collaboration and the discussions they have, but you might have that student who it might be more difficult in some other areas for them to show exactly what they know. But when they're working in those teams and they're investigating and they're sharing knowledge, it really becomes everybody's project, everybody's thinking together to form that final inclusion. And so I really noticed that with the students, how it engages all types of students, all levels of learners, and lets some people shine that maybe didn't have an opportunity to shine in some other areas.
Right. I always bring it to I grew up as an artist and a cartoonist, and science was always awesome to me because I could visualize these things.
Right.
So I was the kid that would make the graphs,
Exactly.
it's like, give it to Tom. Oh, yeah, I'm making graphs and drawing pictures. It was awesome. So, yeah.
Yeah. And that's a big part of our resource with FOSS as well. Is it truly the student scientific drawing and their thinking is in that notebook. And so that notebooking, the students carry it around very precious for them. They have their science notebooks and they are scientists with their notebooks and gathering their data and doing their sketches. And so you see them acting and thinking like scientists, and it just gives them those opportunities to feel successful at that.
Yeah, we recently did an episode on nature journaling and how important that is. And I think that as a kid, I would have just eaten this up.
Yeah.
It'd just been the greatest thing in the world.
It's very different science than I had when I was back in school, because we were a lot of, reading and answering some questions, and then science time was done. So this is a very exciting.
I know. I think you and I are of a same time period, and it was very much it was like read, learn, here are the dates, here are the scientists, go.
Exactly. Now you know.
Oh, that was fun. Yay!
I agree.
To wrap it up, do you have any tips or tricks for districts that are thinking about implementing FOSS or a science curriculum, but especially FOSS? What should people be looking for? Who would they contact? I mean, you've laid a lot of this out with your amazing hierarchy and the long plan of 3 years and all that kind of stuff is great. But in general, if somebody's like, we're really interested in doing this, how would they go about that?
Right. Well, one thing that I guess I would say when you are looking at something, FOSS is pretty intense, right? Because there's a lot of pieces to it. We started on a little bit smaller scale. We're at the point now where we have 3 modules for all of our teachers, but knowing a new resource, whether it be FOSS or anything else you might choose, we slowed it down a little bit and tried to really get them used to the format of the resource and how to use it with students or how all the pieces worked. before we added all 3 modules in. So we kind of did a little gradual release and got them comfortable with their materials and let them feel what it was like to really go through an entire module and see it from beginning to end before we added more. And we're able to get a little further each time. We, we do a lot of talking with other districts around us. As the curriculum person, part of what I do when I'm looking for resources or where to start is I look at some of the networks I have within my own state or area. And I always don't mind being a resource for anyone just to talk to them about the process that we've gone through. But then I think the other part is that is probably the most critical is your professional development plan. And I would say that's where what you put into it really will give you your true output, and that having something that you work through that gives continuous support over time and to keep checking and monitoring how that's going with your teachers has been the key for us. We have a huge investment in our administration. They, really had to put time, resources, and the commitment that they would give us that time to support our teachers was big. It was a big undertaking when you do it district-wide. So I think getting that team together to really look at what that could be and finding that support of your administrators, your coaches, whoever might be part of leading that, and then knowing that it's a journey, it's something that over time the investment will really pay off for the people that you're working with.
Well, obviously, we are very pleased that you chose FOSS, but obviously, yes, the most important part is having everybody buy in, having professional development. So whatever you're doing, you've got to do that research, and definitely sounds like you guys put the time and effort in.
Well, it was pretty fun because as a teacher that taught FOSS and in the classroom for so many years, I think I had to look back on a lot of my experiences and when things really felt like I understood them and could talk about them and do them, came with what type of professional development really was available for us. And so that is my biggest tip. Really, really look at your layout. And that's where we've come to really partner with FOSS. We purchased, we bought, we did whatever, but I really feel like there's a true partnership with them and that there are many people there that I could call, email, write at any point because we've built that team together and feel very supported with the investment that we have made.
Well, I couldn't ask for a better ending to the podcast for that. So, Nicole Krefting from North Dakota Grand Forks School District, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you. This has been exciting, and I just look forward to hearing all your episodes of It's Time for Science.
It's Time for Science is produced, recorded, and edited by David Lippman and Tom Racine, and is sponsored by School Specialty and FOSS, the full option science system, at the Lawrence Hall of Science, UC Berkeley. Be sure to check out FOSS over on Facebook and Twitter.